Welcome to the Finding Financial Freedom podcast with the Frugal Physician, where Dr. Disha Spath will be your companion on this exciting financial adventure. Get ready to conquer debt, build wealth, and embrace a mindful spending lifestyle that will empower you to live life on your own terms.
Welcome to Finding Financial Freedom with the Frugal Physician. I'm your host, Dr. Disha Spath, and today we have an exceptional guest who happens to share a name with me, Dr. Disha Mookherjee Phillip. Dr. Mookherjee Phillip is a cardiologist healer who deals with all matters of the heart. Over her 20 years of practicing medicine, she's become acutely aware of the role stress plays in heart health. While fascinated by the technological progress in cardiology, she realized that pills, procedures, or surgeries don't always lead to full healing. She incorporates spirituality into her practice, asking every patient about their spiritual practice as she sees a direct connection between this and their prognosis. Dr. Mookherjee Phillip's personal spiritual journey began 16 years ago after losing her first child due to a complication from a vacuum delivery. She describes that experience as teaching her one of life's greatest lessons. Love doesn't start at birth and it doesn't end with death. She is now a Chopra Center certified primordial sound meditations teacher, certified in heart math, and a holistic life coach. Her signature program, The Path to Meditation Mastery, introduces personalized meditation practices as an antidote to stress. In addition to practicing cardiology, Dr. Mookherjee Phillip is a sought-after speaker on stress management for companies, co-hosts the Path of Silence Retreat, and manages 2 Facebook groups, Meditation for Female Physicians and the Heart-Centered Living Group. I'm excited to dive into this conversation today, so let's get started. Welcome to the show, Dr. Mookherjee Phillip.
Thank you, Dr. Disha Spath. Or you say Disha, so I say Disha, so that's a little bit different.
That's right. You're Disha, and I'm Disha.
Yeah, and we live near each other, which is super cool too.
Yeah. You're just up the road from me in Saratoga Springs, so it's super great to have you here. Let's get started by introducing you to our audience. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from?
Yeah, so I say I'm a cardiologist who deals with all matters of the heart, and I was born and raised in Syracuse, New York. I come from a family of physicians. My dad is a 92-year-old cardiologist who still works 3 days a week running the
Wow.
fellow clinic at Upstate. Yeah. He does. He loves Journal Club. He goes to all the conferences. The thing that he loves to do is listen to cases and talk about what they can do to help patients. I mean, he's still my number one consult if I don't know what to do with a patient.
Oh my gosh.
You know, even though I've been practicing for 20 years, I mean, my dad's been practicing for 50, right? More than that, whatever it is. He became a doctor when he was 23, right? So,
What an amazing resource for you.
Totally. My sister's a cardiologist. Her husband's a cardiologist. And then my brother is an internist, a hospitalist like yourself. And then his wife is a breast radiologist. So there's a lot of us docs. Since I was born and raised here, I say I'm a first generation Indian American because my parents are the immigrants. And so my children are second generation. That's how I describe it. And so growing up in Syracuse, I grew up in a Hindu household. Growing up with all like the pujas and the worship, like our house was kind of like the center of that kind of cultural, religious stuff. And so we were always having people come to our house for things like that. But I grew up going to Catholic school. My mother sent all 3 of us to Catholic school because she would watch the kids in front of our house walk to the public school that we were zoned for. And they had like mohawks and tattoos. And my mother's like, my kid's on there. So she was also very big on discipline. And she believed that if we went to Catholic school, that we would have more discipline. So I grew up going kind of like a dichotomy kind of a situation. I was like the only non-Catholic in my school and like the one brown Indian person. And, you know, at home, we had a lot of cultural stuff going on. And that's kind of how I grew up. I didn't really feel like I had much of a spiritual connection per se. I was just kind of exposed to all this stuff. And then like whenever I would ask my parents, like, why are we doing this ritual or that ritual, like during the pujas and stuff, like they really couldn't tell me. They really couldn't, and like my dad would be like, they're just empty rituals, Baba. I do it for domestic tranquility's sake. My father made him. And he grew up learning Sanskrit. And so he knew the mantras and he knew all the stuff because he was raised that way. So he's like, that's why I do it. They're all useless, honestly. I don't know what, But he doesn't do it. And yet there he was, right? There he was doing it. And I was also I'm a trained Bharatanatyam dancer. And so I did my Arangetram when I was 17 years old. I gotta say, I think that my dance teacher helped me learn a little bit about like the Hindu mythology and those stories and stuff like that. And so she would actually answer more questions for me. And plus I had to understand those stories and stuff in order to be able to act them out and dance accurately. So that's kind of like religion wise, the background. I was actually, when I saw the name of your like business and podcast, A Frugal Physician, I was very struck because that word frugal has been in my awareness since I was a kid, because my dad would always tell me the importance of frugality and how because he was frugal, he's been able to get to where he is in life. And so that's why I was really struck. And I was kind of excited to have this conversation with you because also like the way my dad grew up. So remember, he's like 92. So he was born in 1932. And so in India, Calcutta. And he did not come from a wealthy family at all. He did exceptionally well in school. We always heard the stories, all the gold medals in medical school and number one in West Bengal, blah, blah, blah. Or it's kind of hard to like live up to. But because of his academic stuff, like he was able to like get different jobs that got him out of Calcutta. He went to the jungles of Orissa and then East Germany. But he did it all on his own because his family did not have money to give him. In fact, he was paying off his own father's loans as he left. So like my dad had to actually escape from East Germany to West Germany to go to London. And so he had all these different like East German marks and like he had to hide some and he had to save some. And he was always sending money back home to India too.
Wow.
He would be like, I would give 3 to my family in India. I would live on 1 and I would save 1.
What amazing discipline.
I mean, I think it was survival for him.
Yeah. So interesting how our upbringing really shapes our viewpoint, because a lot of people that hear the word frugal often want to run away because they don't want to they don't want to even think about limitation or discipline, right? It's somewhat of a negative connotation, and sounds like you grew up also in the Indian culture, but maybe not so immersed in it in Catholic school. Often we grow up, we start to realize the wisdom in the words of our parents, where initially we kind of stray away from them, right? Especially in our teenage years, we want to rebel against everything they have to say. But as we grow up, we start to realize the wisdom in what they are teaching. But did you ever feel like, screw frugality and I'm just going to go spend?
So for me, I mean, I heard it at such a young age. Even if I found like coins around the house, I had this little bunny piggy bank.
Oh,
And I would like put the coins in. And then I would even like, I remember going to the bank to open a bank account with my dad. And I would like ride my little bike with the basket and like take the money to the bank and put it in my account. Like here's
oh
the
my
coins,
gosh.
here's the dollars that I found. Yeah, I would do that. But then I would also go to like the local drugstore and buy like my sweethearts or whatever too. So I always knew, and this was more me than my siblings, I would say, because I'm a little different because my siblings, we're not all the same in this. And I'm recognizing this as we're having this conversation. So I was always a big time saver. And I feel like I've always had a little bit of a scarcity mindset, actually, meaning like, I better hold on to it. Don't spend it all. No, you don't have it. Even if I have more money coming in, it always felt like it's not enough. For me, I did not rebel. against it. It's been like a sanskara, right? So, which is, if you know that word, it's like your conditioning, right? That you have, that you receive from your parents, from society, from whatever as you grow older. So, it's been like a sanskara of mine where I don't want to spend when I really can a little bit, here and there, and then thinking about prioritizing where I can and where I shouldn't. And then actually for me, it's been stepping into more of an abundance mindset rather than a scarcity mindset. My siblings, one of my siblings is like, you know what, if I can throw money at something and have that be taken care of for me, I want that because there's so much she wants to do. That's her mindset. And then there's like everything in between too, because then I'll be like, well, if I can do it myself and save this much money, then I'll do that. And I've stayed that way for a really long time when maybe sometimes I should be hiring it out and just paying for it.
Funny story about that. My husband actually has a very similar mindset to you and me too. If I can do it myself, I want to do it myself. But at some point, you realize there's not enough time in the day to do all the things I want to do myself. I've become more of an outsourcer recently, but my husband, oh my gosh. So, like, we had these kids come to our house to wash our windows. They wanted to wash our windows from the outside. And I was like, yes, yes, let's go for it. Like easy. I wanted to find someone to hire to do this anyway. Let's just do it. And he was like, no, I'm not paying that much money for window washing. I'm going to do it myself. So, lo and behold, goes to try to bend in the windows. You can take them off the rails and bend them inside to wash the outside. He over torqued it and it cracked, and one of the pieces of glass hit him in the shin and cut his shin open. And so he was in my ER the other day getting stitches. And yeah, now he's hurt. Anyway, that just shows you that sometimes you should outsource.
It's not worth it sometimes,
I
right?
know. I mean, yes, accidents happen.
It's interesting too because my husband will say, I still remember this. Like I was just in this cleaning mode, right? And I'm like I'm cleaning the bathroom, I'm cleaning the toilets. And he stopped me and he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm cleaning the toilet. He's like, you did not become a cardiologist to clean toilets. And I was like, that doesn't even occur to me. I'm like, what do you mean? Right? And it was very interesting. I appreciated what he was saying. Not that there's anything wrong with cleaning toilets. It's okay. I just don't think that was like, if I can do it myself, I'll just do it myself, whatever. I've always said it myself. But then like, this is another thing. One of my mentors in fellowship had told me, Dish, you're going to have kids. And I had asked her, she had 2 children. How do you do it? And she was like, hire help. I don't understand, right? Whereas the first kid and you're coming into this, right? You think, you have no idea. Nobody tells you anything. And lo and behold, I mean, we ended up having 20 nannies in 5 years when our kids were young. And we had to.
What does your husband do, Disha?
So he does finance. And so he does a lot of stuff with like options trading and things like that. Yeah. So he works from home too.
I see. And is he full time?
Pretty much. Yeah. I mean, that's what he does. I mean, he doesn't work for anybody. And so somebody had said to me, oh, you make the money and he makes it grow. I'm like, yeah, and that's the goal. Because he understands all of that stuff. My method of finances is the frugality aspect. Is like, okay, where can I save? Like, where can I not spend? Whereas he's really good at figuring out where to invest, how to invest, what's growing, what company has promise, all that kind of stuff.
Let's go back to your journey with your daughter and how you got into meditation. Tell me about that. Tell me about the transition, what kind of time period you were in, and why you felt like you had to incorporate the Eastern practices of meditation back into your life.
Great question. Thank you. So we had gotten married in 2006 at the end of my residency, 3rd year of residency, transitioning to fellowship, right? July 1 is when fellowship starts. I moved to Chicago. I did my cardiology fellowship at Rush. And so my 2nd year of fellowship, we decided to get pregnant. And he was working for a consulting company at the time. And so he was flying every single week to New York City. We'd been together since college. So we'd been together like 8 years. So it's not, then we finally got married. So we were ready, we didn't have to be married forever to decide to have kids. And, I was getting close to 30. And so I got pregnant very easily. The pregnancy went pretty well. But then at the end of my second year of fellowship is when I was due. And I'm actually very petite. So I'm 4'10". And the reason I say that is because they felt that the baby was small. I think maybe also they're comparing to Western standards, right? I'm a
Sure.
petite South Asian woman. The baby was probably normal size for me. Nevertheless, they decided that it would be better to induce. So we went in for the induction and I was in labor for like 30 hours. It wasn't progressing, this, that, lots of things. And so then finally we got to the point where it was time to push. The doctor used a vacuum on her head within like 5 minutes of pushing and ended up causing a huge bleed. I'm just going very quickly through this. They had to do CPR on her as soon as she came out, giving her blood and all of that. And then by her second day of life, she was brain dead.
Oh my
And on day 4, we made the decision to take her off the ventilator. I mean, it was, of course, I can still see it like it was yesterday, right? And this
Right.
is a traumatic experience, right? But I was really fortunate in that my parents had flown out from New York. My father-in-law and brother-in-law had flown out. In the moment when I finally realized that this is what we would have to do, it's like I was laser focused on what needed to happen. And I was like, you know what? This is how this is going to go. She came out of my body. I'm going to be the one to allow her soul to leave that body. I'm going to take off the tape. I'm going to take our IVs out. I'm going to take her NG tube out, and I'm going to be the one to take her off that ventilator. I sat down the whole family and I said, this is what's going on, guys. You can stay. You can go. I do not care, but this is what's happening. Because I was like, I don't want to hear any judgment. I don't want to hear what you think I should do or shouldn't do. I was 30. At that time, I was like, this is my one chance to show her love in the body. And this is how I'm going to do it. And I'm going to bathe her. I'm going to hold her skin to skin. I was so excited to like nurse and hold her skin to skin and all of that before, she was born. It was May 10th going into May 11th. And that year, May 11th was Mother's Day. And it was amazing. Everybody stayed. My father-in-law left, but everybody else stayed. And the nurses and social workers were just amazing. This was all at Northwestern Hospital in Chicago. And we took our time and finally, they gave us baby oil to take off the tape. They asked me over and over again, do you want a photographer? And I was like, that is like the weirdest question ever. All I could picture are like wedding photographers,
Right.
And I'm so grateful they didn't just have me say no and give up. They just kept asking me. They're like, are you sure? Like, you don't have to pay for it. I was like, oh, you don't have to pay for it?
Super good loan.
Maybe. And they're like, yeah, you don't even have to look at them if you don't want to at the end. And I was like, okay, fine. And let me tell you, I am so grateful that I said yeah, because I don't even remember the photographer being there. But when I got those pictures, and I'll share with you one day, that
Please.
album is a love story because everybody's in there. Everybody held her. So at the end, we held her skin to skin. Everybody had taken turns and we kept the tube in all the way till the end. And then I noticed that she was getting dusky. And so I handed her to my husband and I said, you hold her while I take it out. He looked at the clock and he was like, you know what? He's like, let's just give it 20 more minutes because he noticed it was like 11:40 p.m. And he said to me, he's like, I want you to wait 20 more minutes because I want you to have a Mother's Day. And so we did. And then I took out the tube and he gave him back to me. And I said, call the chaplain. And the chaplain came and then the doctor came and the doctor listened with her stethoscope. And she said, okay, time of death, 12:39 a.m. And I said, that's my time of birth.
Oh, wow.
Like literally my time of birth was 12:39 a.m. And her pronounced time of death was 12:39 a.m. It was incredible. The chaplain came and read Psalm 129 from the Bible. It's for those of you who know that. And my best friend was there, Dr. Reedy Abraham, and she's an internist at UT Southwestern. She was there through the whole thing with me. And believe it or not, fast forward 4 years after that, I was there with her when she gave birth to her firstborn son, who was born still.
Oh,
Yeah, it's crazy. Again, I don't believe in coincidences. When this experience happened, I mean, it rocked me to my core because even though as a cardiologist, as a physician, right, we're dealing with life and death all the time. But when it's your own. It's just different. I don't know. Like, it never occurred to me that this could happen. Why would it? Well, how many of us get pregnant thinking that this is what's going to happen, right? We
Right.
can't. And if somebody had told me years before that this would happen, I probably wouldn't have even had kids. Or I wouldn't, I just wouldn't believe them. And so I started asking the big questions of what is real, what isn't, what does life mean, why am I here, what matters, and these are the deep, deep questions I started asking, because suddenly all the things that I cared about, women and heart disease and prevention and like all this stuff, none of it mattered. And this was grief. And so we started on the journey of grief. And so, yeah, this experience catapulted me into my spiritual journey. First book I read was Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth. If you've ever read it, maybe you haven't,
No.
but it's just really starting to look at what is happening. Why is this happening? Right. And then all these negative thoughts start coming. Am I being punished? Right. Is it because of the Splenda that I put in my coffee one day? Why did this happen to me? Right. And nobody could tell me at the time what had happened or why she had passed. We only found out later that it was because of the bleed from the vacuum.
From the vacuum. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I didn't know why. Right. I didn't
Gosh.
know. And I had them I was like, we want a full autopsy. I want full karyotype. I want full everything. Get every single sample you possibly can, because nobody can tell me right now why this is happening. And only through the years, and once I started getting the records and once I started seeing everything, all the stuff, did everything get pieced together. And the other thing that was really traumatic that happened also was that, well, when I came back, so that happened in May, July 1st, I started my third year of fellowship. That's a whole nother story about coming back to the same hospital where I was pregnant and gave birth to, with my colleagues, with the entire hospital knowing and seeing. It was like the hospital. It was like the fellowship's pregnancy, right? It's the hospital's pregnancy. The lunch lady knew I was pregnant. The janitors knew I was pregnant, right? Everybody was like, oh my God, but not everybody knew that the baby had passed when I came back. So that grief journey is a whole nother story, navigating. But what happened was that the first day I came back to work, I went to the maternity ward because I'd become very close with the nurses there, because I was getting a lot of AFI checks and non-stress tests and stuff before the delivery. So we all got to know each other, and I hadn't talked to them at all. And I had a little book of pictures of Ria. Her name was Ria, R-I-A, Ria. And that I would keep in my white coat pocket just in case I felt like I wanted to share with someone, which is totally different than when you have a new baby and you come back to work and your baby's alive, right? Like, so the pictures are everywhere, right?
Right.
It's in a frame, it's in a calendar, it's in like everywhere, right? So here, like, I was going back feeling like I really couldn't share. I didn't know how people were going to react, and everybody reacted very differently, very differently. Some people literally ran away from me, like I had a contagious disease, because they didn't know what to say. People who didn't even know me, it still brings me to tears. Like, it was like the janitor came up to me, was like, "Doc, what happened with your baby? Let me see a picture." And I was like, "This is what happened." And he was like, "Oh, Doc, so sorry," and gave me this big hug. Whereas so many of my physician colleagues, actually, I know that they were doing the best they can with the tools that they had, but they didn't know what to say. The tears are not about the sadness. The tears for me is the warmth that I felt, and the love and the grace from people that I didn't even expect it from. And so I always say, like, actually, I wrote a book. I was going through book titles. One of the titles was Grace Realized, because in the kindness of friends, of acquaintances, or of people that I didn't even know, that I suddenly felt all this love coming towards me. And I was like, wow, right? Like, what is this? I don't know if I would have done this for my friend, like if I hadn't gone through this. Like, I don't know if I would have shown up that way. We had friends drive across the country. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. They lined up on the floor and were there because they didn't want us to be all by ourselves those first couple weeks,
Oh,
our bedroom. Yeah.
that's
And
so
so
sweet.
it was so sweet. It was so sweet. They donated a bunch of money to the Chicago Botanic Gardens to have a tree dedicated to her forever.
Wow.
Forever. Yeah. And there's a tag on it. And it was just like so incredible, the love and the kindness that showed up. And to me, yes, that was grace. That was grace, and the divine. But that's not when I started meditating, believe it or not. So what happened was that fast forward 2 years, I finished my fellowship. Yes, I passed my boards, which my program director didn't think I would be able to do, but I did. And
Congratulations.
yeah, that was a big deal. He's like, I'm concerned about you. And I'm like, thanks a lot, buddy. But I worked a lot out. My sister and I studied together because she also finished cardiology fellowship at the same time as me. And what happened was I finally regrew the skin, right? Like when we go through such a traumatic event, you feel very raw. You don't feel safe. I didn't feel safe. I regrew some of that skin somehow and decided that I wanted to try again. And so we had our second daughter, Elise, in 2011, and then our third daughter, Nina, in 2014. Fast forward, right? We're in Duluth, Minnesota. I am a full-time attending cardiologist working 70 hours a week. My husband decided to start his own business. We have 2 kids under the age of 3. I'm trying to sleep train the older one, and I'm nursing the other one every 2.5 to 3 hours.
Wow. That's rough.
Very rough. And the next thing I know, I'm at work, knock, knock, knock. My clinic manager is coming into my office. He's like, hey, Doc, can we talk for a second? I'm like, sure, yeah, what's up? He didn't close the door. He's like, you look like your mind's going a million miles a minute. What is going on? And I was like, what? What? And I was horrified. I was horrified. I was embarrassed. I thought I had been keeping it together, and clearly I hadn't been, right? So I was like, okay, this is the problem, right? I'm running on the hamster wheel, right? I'm going, right? I'm being the human doing, right? This is what a Deepak Chopra is saying. He's like, are we human doings or are we human beings, right? Happens, right? And especially as physicians, right? And even female physicians, when we're juggling the family, we're doing all this. And literally, like I said, we had 20 nannies in 5 years, right? And so we're also navigating that. And at the time, I felt like hemorrhaging money, right? So for all of this, right?
It's tough.
Oh my gosh, it was so tough. And at that moment, that clinic manager, it's so funny because I didn't like him for the longest time. And now I see him as this little angel who came and gave me that wake up call of something needs to change, Doc, right?
Mm.
I knew at that moment that nothing outside of me was going to change. Getting a divorce, that's the other thing that happened is that I suddenly, we were like 2 ships passing in the night because he's so busy with his stuff. I'm so busy with my stuff. We barely talk. Everybody's just so busy, right? So that
Right.
connection was totally gone. I don't feel happy in that way. I don't even have time to be happy, right? So then I feel very isolated and alone also, right? So I recognize there's no answer outside of me. Meds aren't going to change anything. Like what? Right? My kids, I'm not getting rid of them. Of course not. It's everything that I wanted, right? Especially after losing Rhea. And when I decided, you know what? No, I still want to try to have more children. Why? Because I knew I wanted to be a mother. I knew that that was in my destiny to play that role somehow, some way. And I had 2 more beautiful daughters, blessed, right? So obviously that wasn't going to change. I was a primary breadwinner of my family. That's not going to change, right? So there's nothing outside of me that was going to change. Now, the year before, my sister, my dad, and I, cardiologists, we all went to a cardiac conference at Harvard. And one of the presenters did a whole presentation on the alternative therapies that were out there, the research behind it that helps cardiovascular disease and hypertension and stuff. And so he went through chiropractic care, acupuncture, yoga, meditation. And the only thing in his presentation that he talked about that had statistical significance, improvement in cardiovascular death, decreasing myocardial infarction, right, and improving hypertension and stroke was meditation. I was pregnant at the time with my third, right? And so I kept that kind of in the back of my head. And also I would have tons of patients come in and be like, I don't want another pill, Doc. Isn't there something else I can do? And I was constantly talking about diet and exercise, right? I have a big passion for prevention and reversing disease. But diet and exercise was only going so far. And so when that knock on the door happened for me, I was like, meditation. I have to learn how to do this for myself. And I'm going to try it on me before I go and I start recommending it to other people and other patients. Of course, I had like 40 different books on my shelf about meditation. I read 3 pages and put them away, right? Right? There's YouTube videos, whatever. Never stuck to anything. But I was like, no, I need to get serious about this. And it took courage. And it took me getting out of my comfort zone and being like, all right, I got to like shell out some cash, really figure out how to do this. Right. So that's me. I like being frugal. So like this leap of like, you're going to pay money to someone to teach the day. I was like, yeah, there's like a lot at stake here. There's a lot at stake here. Like I need to be able to keep things together. And I also wasn't showing up as my best self. Obviously, with all of this going on, I'm ordering, correcting, directing at my kids all the time, yelling at them, and just not being who I wanted to be, not the kind of mother I wanted to be. And I was always on edge. And I'm sure many of your listeners can relate to this. So I learned to meditate properly, and literally everything started changing. 20 minutes in the car before I walked into the office, I would sit in the parking lot and meditate. And suddenly I was more productive at work. I was getting my charts done faster and more efficiently. And so one of the other things Deepak Chopra always says is like meditation helps you do less and accomplish more. Because people are like, well, you're just going to sit there. Like my 10-year-old comes in, Mom, when you meditate, you just sit there, pretend you're sleeping with your eyes closed. Right? Well, if you don't know, maybe you've never tried it. It's okay. It looks like from the outside, you're not doing anything, right? Because you're just sitting there potentially. Now I've come a long way in my meditation journey, and I recognize there's a lot of different ways to meditate. And it's not just sitting there quietly with your eyes closed, right? You can do walking meditation. You can do movement meditation. There's all kinds. You can be meditating while you're in work. That's a whole different topic. But so I started doing that. And then I would meditate again for 20 minutes before I walked into the house in the evening. So instead of before I started meditating, I'd walk into the house, drop my stuff, just start like barking or being annoyed with the nanny. Why are the kids on the iPad again? Or you're giving them mac and cheese again? Oh, why didn't you do the laundry? Right. It was like the negative energy was just ridiculous. Like I can just remember it, And again, I wasn't checking my energy at the door. But when I started meditating, I was like, you know what? I'm going to set the intention. This is going to be a calm, quiet, loving evening. And I'm not going to be that way. And I'm going to have a good bedtime with my kids. And bath time suddenly started getting better. I was able to read to both the kids at night and lay with them and, get them off to sleep. Everything started getting better as I started being able to pause in the moment and respond with my heart rather than just react with my reptilian brain.
Yeah.
It was life changing. And so when I started having those experiences, and then I also say this is a little bit of woo, but like when you start taking that pause, you start allowing the universe's infinite wisdom to start coming to you. When you don't allow yourself to take the pause and you constantly go, 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 there's no room in your awareness for all that is possible. Does that make sense? Do you know what I'm saying?
I think it's very telling in your story how physicians, especially the people that are used to intellectualizing and doing, when we go through trauma, often we fall back into intellectualizing and finding answers intellectually, but not in our heart, right? Not in our soul. And it's very, very easy to just turn that trauma into drive and continue, achieve, keep doing. But in that process, often we forget how to connect with our feelings and our soul and our heart. In that process of going, we lose that. And I'm
Yes.
very glad you mentioned, how meditation helped you get back into your soul, your heart, quiet the mind so that you let other wisdom in. Wherever that's coming from, whatever your belief set is, that peace and quiet in the mind is often very difficult to attain as a physician, and we have to actively work at it, right? If someone was trying and has never meditated before and, wants to get into it, wants to just try it out. I mean, like you said, it's just sitting down and closing your eyes, right? But it's more than that. So tell me, like, what are the first steps they can take in that first meditation? What method can they use to just be?
One of the things that I teach, which is like a 3-minute mindset shift, right? Like when you're in the moment and you can feel yourself kind of getting taken away on the runaway train of negative thoughts.
Mhm.
I think, right? And the thoughts just keep racing and racing and racing, right? So being able to even step back just a little bit and notice my thoughts are racing. Who's me? My thoughts. Who's that? Right? To be able to even recognize that is a huge win. So that's number one. So there's an acronym STOP. S is for stop. T is for take 3 deep breaths in and out of your heart. I like to have a visualization where you can visualize your heart with 2 nostrils. Like if you're looking at a diagram, like one in the right ventricle and one on the left ventricle, right? And you're looking at like 2 nostrils and you take a deep breath into your heart. Right, through those heart nostrils, really into your heart, and then you breathe out through those heart nostrils. And one of the things as a heart math practitioner, the other part of it is see if just for 3 breaths, you can also conjure up just feelings of love, joy, peace. It could be a visualization of your kids or of a place that you've been to that you've just felt super peaceful, but just really conjuring up that feeling while you're taking those breaths in and out of your heart. Literally in 3 minutes, you can reset yourself and take that pause. So take it 3 deep breaths, observe, right? Observe. O is for observe in your body. If you're feeling tense, if you're feeling angry or triggered or anxious, observe in your body where you're feeling it. Is it in a tightening in your belly? Is it a tightness in your chest? Right? Is it a tightness up your spine? And then again, it's your signal to take that deep breath into that area, right? And just, okay, I'm not in my heart, I'm in my head. Let's release this and do, right? Breathe into that area. And then P is proceed with kindness. So being kind to yourself. The internal thoughts that we have tend to be very punishing. It's really important that we have an armamentarium of kind thoughts, right? Like that we can get to and that we can just kind of pick off the shelf because we will always be making better decisions from a place of love and kindness rather than from fear and anger. I just want to share one other piece. I mean, we could probably talk for 3 hours. And the reason that I want to share this is because it ties right into what I'm saying at this moment. Part that I forgot to tell you about was that when I went back to work after Rhea died, right, and I went to the nurses and I told them about what happened, they burst into tears. And one of the nurses had said, "Oh, I heard that you had refused a C-section, and I knew that couldn't be true." And I was really like taken aback when she said that to me. Long story short, what happened was that in the medical record, right? I was at a teaching hospital. They did a morbidity mortality conference. And in the medical record, my doctor had written in the chart that the patient, myself, was counseled to have a C-section and she had declined, which is not what happened. And I had multiple witnesses for that. At the time, I was extremely angered, felt extremely hurt, felt betrayed by my doctor. And I came home that day. I told my husband, we need to find a lawyer. This is unacceptable. This is not okay. Right. I felt like she was blaming me for my daughter's death. And we did end up finding an amazing lawyer. It took us 5 years to get to trial, 2.5 weeks in a courtroom, and we lost.
Wow. Why?
I learned a lot of things again. Right? Why is the question, right? Universally or fundamentally in the
Yeah.
planet Earth, right? Right? Again, the why, right? It happens. And I'm going to be a little bit spiritual about this, but in my reflection, right, what I recognized was that at the time I was grieving and I felt like the doctor was blaming me for my daughter's death, right? I'm already blaming myself because as a mother, that's what we do, right? If our kids aren't well, we blame ourselves, right? If
Right.
your kid passes away, you're going to be like, what did I do to make this happen? It's just like this weird human brain thing that we do to ourselves, which is very unkind, right? Very unkind because shit just happens sometimes, right?
Right.
But at that time, right, that's where I was. Now, my doctor was also fully devastated by what happened. And so that day when I found out that she had written all of this stuff, she had actually called me and was checking in on me because she knew it was my first day back. Disha, how are you? And I said, I'm okay, but something happened today and it really bothered me. And she said, what happened? And I told her what happened. And she said, Disha, I didn't say that you refused anything. If anything, I would say that a patient declined because saying refused puts blame on the patient. What? She's like, yeah, there are women out there who don't want to have a C-section. And then when they do, they take it out on their babies. And I was like, if ever you thought that I should have had a C-section sooner, you should have just said something. And she said, oh, Disha, how are you doing physically? I wake up every single night thinking about you. I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about you.
Oh, geez.
The other thing I recognize in hindsight, right? She wrote that because she was afraid, right? She was afraid that I would sue her, which is exactly what happened. And so the lesson that I learned from this whole experience is that any decision made from a place of fear or anger or major negativity will not get you the outcome that you truly want in your heart. She wrote that as a CYA for herself because she didn't want to get sued. She got sued anyways. Yes, she won, but I know that those 5.5 years were not rainbows and unicorns for her. She suffered a lot. Of course. Of course. And then for me, taking action from a place of anger, she can't do this to other people. It's not okay, right? Like from this place in grief, 5.5 years of no fun at all. And 2.5 weeks of reliving everything, watching jurors writing notes to the judge as to why they couldn't be there the next day, watching another juror asleep, another juror didn't even speak English, right? So it's like, what is it? When you get a summons for jury duty, what do? You roll your eyes and try to figure out how you can get out of it, right? Not a jury of my peers, right? That's what's going on here, right? And so I also learned that it's not my job to give justice. And I also learned that 90% of medical malpractice lawsuits go in favor of the physician. Good for us. Thank goodness, right? We're doctors. Thank goodness. Because ultimately, you ask the question, why? Ultimately, society still, fortunately for all of us physicians who are listening, society still does believe that we are trying to do the best that we can and that we have good, honest intention, which I do believe my doctor had. She did not wish for our daughter to pass away. She did not wish that. Yes, it was her second day of being on call. Yes, it was late, close to 5 o'clock when I was starting to push, right? Yes, there was a lot of things that were not in her favor in having this be the best outcome. But her intention was not for a bad outcome. But when we go into that place of fear, and when we dive into those thoughts, right, we don't make good decisions. When we're constantly in a place of being depleted, we're running on empty. Yes, we're going to get triggered. Yes, we're going to make poor decisions because we're not in that place of love. Like I had mentioned, you put in the beginning, right? My daughter taught me that love doesn't start with birth and it doesn't end with death. Just because someone's soul leaves the body doesn't mean that they cease to exist. Doesn't mean that my love suddenly disappears. I loved her the second I had the thought of having her. She wasn't in my physical hands. Every woman who's ever been pregnant knows this feeling, right? They get the positive pregnancy test. Boom, you're off. You're imagining them graduating from high school. You imagine them getting married. You imagine things, right? Luck doesn't start with birth and it doesn't end with death. That is our ultimate truth. And when we come from that place, we feel more alignment.
I think that's very wise. And I think that's a very mature thing to say and feel after having been through all the things that you went through. What do you have to say to the doctor that's listening to this who feels like yoga and meditation is something that's pushed upon them by administration to fix a situation that is not coming from within the physician themselves? It's because of poor administration or too many demands on our time or the way the system's set up. What do you have to say to that doctor that thinks I roll yoga meditation? That's not going to fix medicine or my life for me.
They're not ready. I think that yoga and meditation, I think you know when you're ready for it. If you had asked me in 2003, 10 years prior to this, right, as I was graduating medical school, when I was in residency, that I would be talking and teaching about meditation, no. Ask my sister. She'd be like, you laughed at me. Talk about it, you know? I think that if you have that feeling that this is BS and this is not for me, that's okay. It's not even that you're not ready. It's not for everybody. But if it's something in your heart is saying yes, or if something in your heart is like, this is resonating for me, there's something in here that feels true for me, I would say follow that. I've actually not heard of any administration forcing yoga and meditation on people. That's hilarious to me. I think that's so
It
funny.
happens.
Really
It's not
funny.
forced. It's
That's
wellness
amazing.
modules.
That's hilarious. Yeah. And also, there's a wide variety of take when it comes to this. And then I also say, like, if you have even the slightest bit of curiosity, it's okay to try it. Here's the thing, nobody can control what's going on in here for you, right? You have the power. You are not your thoughts. You are the thinker of your thoughts. So you can choose what you want to think, what you want to expose yourself to. You can choose to sit and watch the news and watch, old history documentaries. Check in with yourself afterwards. Do you feel better or do you feel worse? Sometimes we're addicted to feeling crappy, so it all depends. How do you want to feel? So that's kind of what I would say to that. If it's coming to you, think about it, see how it resonates in your heart. And if it feels good to you, then go for it. But if right now I'm actually doing the 5-week series in my Meditation for Female Physicians group about the 5 things you need to know before you start a meditation practice. And mindset is one of them, right? Even with your finances, mindset is really super duper important. So if you come into it thinking it's not going to work for me, it's not going to.
Exactly. I think, yes, there are administrative obstacles that we face as physicians, as employed physician often. Lots of demands on our time when we don't have it. And yes, there are many, many systemic issues that cause doctors to be overworked and stressed out, but we don't control all of them. We can try to influence them and try to make them more positive or better in different ways, but that doesn't exclude us working on our own responses, our own mindset, our own meditation journey, because the fix to all of it can be multifaceted, right? We shouldn't write off one just because the others are also important. I think your message is an important one for physicians to listen to. And I hope this episode has been helpful to the listener in those minutes that we took to do a meditation ourselves. And if you found that helpful, Disha, where can they find you if they want to hook up with you or learn more from you?
So right now I'm on Facebook, right? So I have the Meditation for Female Physicians group. You can always email me at disha@dishaphillip.com. I also have a meditation with Dr. Disha on YouTube. So I do have some different meditations and stuff like that there. Yeah. So any of those places you can start. I'm working on my website right now. So that's not quite up yet, but it will be hopefully by the end of the year.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today, Dr. Disha. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. For our listeners, if you want to learn more about Dr. Mookherjee Phillips' work, you can visit her Facebook group or email her at the email address she mentioned. I'm sure we've all taken away some valuable lessons today about stress management and holistic healing. Thank you for tuning in to Finding Financial Freedom with the Frugal Physician. Stay tuned for more inspiring conversations, and remember, your health and financial well-being are deeply connected. See you next time.
The content shared on this podcast should not be taken as individualized financial advice. We are here to share our knowledge and experiences, but it is crucial to consult with professionals such as accountants, financial advisors, or attorneys who can provide personalized guidance based on your specific needs.